All right, friends, it is Friday, April 7th, 2023. Welcome to the MMA Eco live podcast. So glad to have you. It is episode 4. Crazy that this has been a part of our lives for a month now. So, really happy to have all of you on the live stream. I'm trying out some new tech today. So, hopefully, over time, things will be upgraded. The sound will be better. The video will be better. The overall technical experience will be better. So, hopefully, all of it works out. There's a few bugs and glitches. That's fine. There usually is the first time you try things out. So but very happy to have all of you on here. We've got a really busy weekend in Asian MMA. So basically what I will do on this podcast is go through kind of the weekend lineup of different events, different fighters, prospects to watch for. If there's any high profile fighters on fights outside of Asia, I'll also cover that as well. And then I will break any news that I've heard or any kind of rumblings that I've heard through the grapevine. And then we will have time for questions from all of you, which is definitely my favorite part of that. You can, at any time, you can fire those questions in the chat and then I will get to those. For now, if you haven't already, you can subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be just continually ramping up this channel into a powerhouse. So hopefully you will consider that. But first of all, let me get to some results from a couple days ago. This was a pretty significant event that went down in Seoul. This was like a Angels Fighting Championship co-promoted show with Heat, which is a Japanese promotion. So it was Korea versus Japan. A couple of those results that are pretty notable that wanted to throw your way because I don't think they're up on Tapology yet. I posted them on my Instagram, but a couple fighters that I was watching for, a handful of Koreans. In the main event, you had a guy named Ko Seok-hyun, who's now 9-2. He fought Ryuta Sakurai and won the fight by second round TKO. And he won both the AFC but also the Heat middleweight championship. Ko Seok-hyun is definitely a prospect I would want to put on your radar, especially for middleweight. You know, you don't have a whole lot of Asian fighters at like middleweight and above. A couple good Korean fighters at middleweight and like heavyweight in the UFC, but Ko Seok-hyun, I think that you'll probably see him in a bigger promotion here in the near future. Don't have anything definite on that, but I do know at least that like the UFC is aware of him. You know, there's like you're always wondering like, are you guys aware that this fighter exists? They are aware. So nothing beyond that, but like definitely a guy to watch for, see if he comes up in any headlines. So yeah, that was a great fight. Ko Seok-hyun a great fight for Ko. It wasn't a good fight for Sakurai. Wasn't really sure why they made this matchup. Seeing as Sakurai was he's a lot older than Ko Seok-hyun, but it was a pretty one-sided fight. The referee almost stopped it after the first round because Sakurai's face was just really bad shape. Cuts, multiple places swelling, did not look good at all, especially when you have a guy that's that old. You definitely want to play on the safe side. So yeah, Ko Seok-hyun came in combination against the cage. Sakurai kind of started to crumble and the ref didn't let it go on any further than that. He stepped in. So good on him. Another guy that won was Kim Sang-hwan. Kim Sang-hwan. He won against Seima Yamada by unanimous decision. And I have received word that he is going to, well, not just I, his management posted it, but he will be in Road to UFC this May in the featherweight division. So yeah, just pulling up that announcement. That was from his management at First Round announced that. So he'll be fighting at featherweight in Road to UFC. So good for him. Speaking of Road to UFC, another guy, Hong Jun Young, fought Takashi Masatoshi and beat him by second round. Hong fought and rode to UFC last year. Didn't make it out of the first round, but good to see him pick up a win. Another prospect that I've been interested in, Seodong Hyun, fought Takuya Kuramoto, won by unanimous decision. He's now 5-2-1. He's first round management has been picking up so many Korean fighters lately. It's ridiculous. They've got Kosa Kyun, they've got Kim Sang-won, they've got Seodong Hyun, all these guys that were on this AFC card. Apparently, they also have Kim Min-woo as well, formerly of Ruby Sports. So props to my friend Steven, who was recently hired by First Round, and he has just been signing Koreans left and right. So that's so cool. So yeah, that was a good show. I think Korea eventually edged it out. I think Japan won 2 or 3 fights, and the Koreans won the rest. One guy, to give it to the Japanese fighters, one guy that I was interested in, and I wasn't totally sold on him as a prospect, but I think I mentioned him last week. His name is Judong Jo. He was 4-0. He lost his fight. I can't remember the name of the guy that he fought, but he ended up losing that fight by decision. So back to the drawing board for him. But actually right now, kind of switching gears a little bit here, right now in PFL, Yoko Hagashi is fighting in the featherweight tournament. So she is fighting Marina Moknaknina. First name Marina. That part I can pronounce. But yeah, Yoko Hagashi, who is a veteran of Deep Jewel, she'll be fighting about now in the PFL. So maybe you've got that up on a side screen on your phone. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be checking into that result after this stream is over. But apart from that, this weekend is a really big weekend for Chinese MMA. So tomorrow morning, or at least tomorrow morning in the US, there's going to be like 3 Chinese events going on at the same time. I've been telling you guys that like Chinese MMA is back, and then like there are kind of like stops and starts to it, but now it's like actually back to where it's not just like the JCK that's kind of coming and going. It's not just WLF having a show every 3 months behind closed doors. Now it's like WLF has got live shows every single month. JCK is having shows every week, sometimes 2 every week. And then you've also got tomorrow, Bullet Fly FC is going to be having their first show since the pandemic. So that's great. However, I know a couple of the top fights on that show did fall out. So for Bullet Fly, not a lot of big names on that show. Probably the guy that I'm interested in most is Zhang Shuai. He's from the Black Tiger gym, which is where Zhang Wei Li comes from. So kind of a friend, training partner of Zhang Wei Li. Zhang Shuai will be competing on that card. I believe that event airs on the Kwai Show app as well as PPTV, another Chinese streaming service. Want to say 3 a.m. Pacific, 7 a.m. Eastern in the US, which I'm trying to like do the math of when that airs in China. If you're in China, I'm sure you can do the math on that on your own. But yeah, so that's great. Bullet Fly FC is coming back. Also, tomorrow morning, we've also got WLF is having a live show in Guizhou province. Sort of a couple prospects that are on that card. Let me see who we got there. We've got Feng Tian Hao in the main event. So that'll be interesting to watch. He is fighting a Brazilian guy who is, I think he's got a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. I've got the fight card for this event in Chinese, but okay, here's the deal. So many times, like in China, they will come out with these fight cards and it'll be like a lot of Chinese fighters against a lot of foreign fighters. And the foreign fighter's name will be like translated to Chinese characters, and it'll only be like their first name or their last name, or sometimes even just part of their last name. And so it can be really tricky to figure out who these fighters are. So, I've been going through for Tapology and figuring out as many of those fighters as I can. So The fight card, as much as I know right now, is on Tapology. I'm going to see if I can figure out a couple of the other ones. If anyone knows the name of Feng Tianhao's opponent, hit me up. That would be really helpful. So, but yeah, Feng Tianhao is going to be fighting. He is a solid prospect, been winning a lot lately, been really active. But yes, a couple other fighters that were supposed to be on that card, like Zhao Zhikong was supposed to be on that fight card. He's like 26-6. And he's actually fighting at JCK this weekend. So I don't know if they didn't realize he'd been double booked. But he was originally supposed to fight on that card. Xiao Long of Dana White's Contender Series and scheduled for Road to UFC last year. He was supposed to fight on that card as well. He no longer is. I've heard rumors that Xiao Long is fighting in Road to UFC, but I have not definitively been able to confirm that yet. So I don't know if that's part of it, if it's like April 8th, a little bit too close to Road to UFC. So, but I know, Kim Sang-wong fought last Thursday and he's in Road to UFC. So, but maybe that's like the cutoff. April 6th, no one can have fights after that and fight in Road to UFC. So I don't know if that's part of it. That's just a hypothesis. But yeah, WLF has an event tomorrow morning that airs on the Douyin app. If you're in the US, good luck. I managed to get that app on my phone. It took some technological judo for me to get it on there, but I do have it. So I will be watching it and throwing out updates on my Twitter. JCK's their event this weekend. A couple fighters that I've got obviously Zhao Zhikong is on there. In the main event, should be a fun fight. It's a welterweight fight between Wurgan Bayar and Kuarbanjong Tuolosebaka. The fact that I have all those names memorized shows you that I've spent way too much time on the Chinese internet. Yeah, that should be a fun fight. Two strikers, heavy hands. That should be good. Two other prospects that I'm looking at on this JCK show is Hailai Arke, who is he's of the E ethnic minority. He's 4-0. Had my eye on him for a while. Another guy that I'm watching, Naartai Kutzibai. He is 4-1. Both two guys that I've kind of got my eye on. I'm not ready to say like they're China's next big prospect, but always interested when they're fighting. And then also you've got Shang Zhifa is on this card. He is fighting Zhou Kun, and kind of a weird matchup. One of those fights that happens inevitably when you have a tournament and fighters with a lot of experience end up going against fighters with not a lot of experience. So yeah, that should be interesting. Just making sure everything is like, okay, sound is good, everything. All right. So yeah, that's a JCK, WF, Bullet Fly, a lot of stuff. I will be waking up very early at 3 a.m. to try and catch as many of those as I can. So we've got those. And then this weekend, tomorrow night in the US, we've got UFC 287. Should be a pretty fun card, some interesting fights. A shame that we lost Li Jingliang. Of course, definitely well wishes to him to heal up. Spinal cord injury is definitely nothing that you want to play around with or take lightly. So happy that he's getting that taken care of. But sucks we didn't get to see Li Jingliang versus Michael Chiesa. That would have been a great fight. But we do still have Shayilan Nuerdanbieke, an absolute powerhouse of a Kazakh Chinese guy. Just like every time I see training photos of Shayilan down in Florida, he just looks so superhuman. I'm just like, how is this guy going to cut down to 146 pounds? But yeah, so Shayilan, he is a tank. Of course, he gained some notoriety. I guess not necessarily bad notoriety. Last year with the whole Derek Minner fight. Of course, none of that was his fault. He was just fighting the fight. So didn't necessarily get any bad press because of that, but he definitely got some elevated notoriety from that. But kind of a weird fight. I'm surprised that they made this fight with him against Steve Garcia, because it feels like Shayilan should have gotten a little bit better opponent than that. But I guess Steve Garcia, he is just coming off that knockout of Chase Hooper, so that was a big deal. Got heavy hands, getting better, so we'll see. I'm not just saying this because you know, I know Shayilan and you know, a report on Chinese news, but I think he should have this fairly easily, especially if he really uses his wrestling and physicality. But we'll see. Should be a good fight. Curious to see what you all think of this. Actually, let's look at Tapology real quick and see what the fan vote is on this right now. I know I could look at odds too, but there's a lot of weird stuff that sometimes goes into that for me. So right now on Tapology, 86% of people are voting for Shayilan. Most of those are by decision, but there's also a lot of predictions by TKO. So yeah, I could see it maybe like a second round or third round, like ground and pound TKO, maybe potentially decision too. So we'll see how that fight goes. Should be interesting. Another, since have been talking a lot about Road to UFC this show, again, another guy who is sort of Road to UFC notoriety is Takeru Uchida. He is fighting again on this weekend, kind of April 8th, 9th. Wow, there's the brightest rainbow I've ever seen in my entire life outside. Wow. That is like 7 times brighter than any rainbow I have ever seen. Okay, sorry. I usually try to like not point out distractions in my live streams, but like that is like simply the most brilliant rainbow ever. Anyways, so yeah, we've got Takeru Uchida fighting this weekend. Another really young Japanese prospect who has a lot of really amazing talents. He fought at Road to UFC last year in a non-tournament bout. He won that fight, and then he went back to the Japanese regional scene last year and lost his next fight. So, you know, but he's only like what, 19, 20 years old. So he has a lot of time to develop. It's okay to take losses at this point. So either way, I'm interested to see him fight this weekend in Shudo. That will be in Tokyo, as you can see on the screen. So he will be fighting Nobuhiro Katayama. So that is at Shudo Gig Tokyo, volume 34. And let's just take a look at his opponent real quick. 5-0, 25 years old, flyweight. So this is actually a really evenly matched fight at Shudo this weekend. Katayama hasn't really fought anyone. He hasn't fought anyone with more than 4 pro fights or more than 2 wins. So this is a really big step up for Katayama. Katayama, 25 years old. Uchida is 20 years old. Jeez. Submitted Sean Etchell by first round rear naked choke last summer at Road to UFC. After that, he fought Yuto Sekiguchi at Shudo last September and lost by first round armbar. So yeah, definitely interesting to watch Uchida's development to see if he can, just develop his game and kind of may the best prospect win at this fight. Uchida definitely has a little more experienced over experienced opponents. So as far as that goes, he's definitely got the advantage. So I'll definitely be following that with interest. So let's get to Road to UFC. I am hearing that there should be an announcement, maybe even within a week, about all of like the fighters, potentially the fights. So the time is running out for speculation, is what I'm saying. So this podcast next week, I may be doing like a deep dive into the fights and all the announced fighters. So I feel like I know probably 80% of all the fighters. A couple spots I still don't know, although as far as I know, they were still filling some spots this week. So it's not even that I don't haven't figured it out, but it's like some things may still be coming together. But let me take a look and see if I can show you this I want to go through. There we go. Looky there. All right. So I'm going to go through because I've been throwing around names all over the place, and it's hard. I realize for everyone to keep track of that. So I put all the names that I feel like I can confidently put out there on this list. There's a couple more names that I know, and a couple fights that I know that I've been told not to not to put them out there. So I will keep those to myself. But as far as flyweights go, that's been the lineup that I think we're all most confident about, that we've known about for the longest time. So these are the flyweight names: Lee Jung-hyun, Mark Klamako, Sumit Kumar, Choi Sung-gook, Billy Pasubulatan, Renal Siahan, Ray Turuya, and Jinu Shuye, China. So a couple of these fights, I think I have figured them out. Some of them have been public. Lee Jung-hyun fighting Mark Klamako and Sumit Kumar versus Choi Sung-gook. I've seen those floated around out there, and I've been able to confirm that that's the plan as well. So at least with anyone on this list, keep in mind that it could change, or there might have even been an injury or a change since the last time I like checked with people close to these fighters or the fighters. So some of these could have changed, is what I'm saying. But just keep in mind, this is the list that I've heard of, and so that leaves 2 fights from this list that are not out there. I think I know which ones those are, but I haven't been able to confirm those yet. Another name, I need to clarify this. Another name that I heard and I put out there that is actually not going to be in the tournament is Gary Mongat. So he's a Canadian, ethnically Indian Canadian, and I kind of had a misunderstanding with like some people around him that kind of indicated that he would be in it, but then it was kind of a communication issue of like, oh, sorry, I thought you meant that he was going to be in it, but he is not going to be in it. He is recovering from surgery. So Gary Mongat, yeah, not going to be in Road to UFC this year. All right, let's move on to the bantamweights. So the bantamweights that at least I can share right now: Lee Chung-ho, Rana Rudra Pratap Singh, Dharamisi Jaupasi, Bargung Jelaisa, Shohei Nose, and Shuya Kamikubo. Again, a couple more names that I have heard about, but the fight that I can put out there, which I've seen floated, is Lee Chong-ho versus Rana Rudra Pratap Singh. That fight has been floated, so that's the fight that I can confidently put out there. But yeah, that's your bantamweights, at least the ones I know for now. Let's move on to featherweights. We've got Ephraim Genting, Reza Arianto, Lee Kai-Win, most likely Abdul Azim Badakshi, and Kim Sang-won. Of course, I mentioned that earlier. Again, a couple more. This is probably the like flimsiest lineup that I know of so far, but these are the names I can put out there. Yeah, and then going on to lightweights, got Batebol Batabalati, Windris Pitalima, Shin Haraguchi, Kim Sang-uk, Hong Sung-chan, and Ki Won Bin. So yeah, I don't think I've seen Ki Won Bin's name floated out there, because I can break that Batebol is going to be fighting Ki Won Bin in Road to UFC lightweight tournament. So there's some breaking news for you. Batebolati versus Ki Won Bin, Road to UFC. Don't have the date on that, February 27th, 28th, but you get the idea. Opening round, those 2 guys are going to be fighting each other. So yeah, those are the names. And then I forgot to put it on this list, but there are a couple more names that I do know for the non-tournament fights. So I've been hearing some names for the non-tournament fights, and I can float some of those out there. Sorry, I don't have them on a cool spreadsheet. But yesterday, or I guess early this morning, I reported that Kai Xiong Sim, 5-0 Singaporean bantamweight, He will be fighting in a non-tournament fight. Chris Hoffman, who is Filipino URCC champion, he will be fighting in a non-tournament welterweight fight. And then another name, which I haven't seen put out there yet, is Peter Daniso, who is Thai. He will be fighting as well, non-tournament flyweight. Peter Daniso, that doesn't sound like a very Thai name. Well, he, I think, is maybe part Dutch, which explains his name. But he's been fighting at Fairtex Fight, Legend FC. He's 5-2, and all the last 5 fights were all wins. So he lost 2, and then he won 5 in a row. His last appearance was at One Friday Fights 4 in February, where he beat Awan Akib by TKO. So yeah, he'll be in it in some regard as well, probably a non-tournament fight. But yeah, that is what I have on Road to UFC so far. So that was fun. Man, just the wonder of like slideshows, so incredible. Okay, well, let's get to your questions. Let's see. Oh man, first of all, I gotta say, I love your questions. The wacky, the crazy, like the hard-hitting questions. Hit me with all of them. Like nothing is seriously off limits. Just don't be racist. Let's see. I have some loaded questions for you. Hopefully me and the boys are not too bad. Been saying that some people say that Carla has a chance because she's been wrestling longer than Weili. But my counterpoint was that Weili has been training with the best coaches in the world, and that showed. Which argument is stronger considering I was right? I mean, the evidence is that who won the fight. I think that's all you gotta, I think that's what you gotta look for. It's like, who's the better fighter? Like, who won the fight? I know there's things that can change like the outcome of a fight night. If someone is sick or some things are off, that can change things. The better fighter may not always win, but like, yeah, I don't feel like there's I don't feel like there's an argument that like Carla is like overall the better grappler when like Zhang Weili submitted her. So what's up? Channel is Liddy, as the kids say. What do you think of pound for pound lists? Ghost, Jack Slack, and Dan Tom have said that they are useless, but South China Morning Post seems to hold them in high regard. I think that they are a helpful guide of trying to think through, who has the best skills, or who, like, skills plus resume. I think that they're helpful and useful for discussion, but they're not like, at the end of the day, they're all just opinions, right? So, and like ultimately, whose opinion, what's one person's opinion, or even like a collective group of people, like, is like, why would their opinion be definitive on who is actually like the best fighter? So I think that they're helpful as long as you kind of keep an open hand with them. Yeah, I think it strikes at a deeper kind of philosophical question of like, in fighting, the whole thing with fighting is that we're trying to figure out who the best fighter is, right? Like that's what drives MMA, is the question, who is the best? So you can't, I mean, like pound for pound lists are sort of inevitable when that question kind of sits at the heart of mixed martial arts, like who is the best? UFC won the tournament. It was which fighting style is the best. If you put all these guys into a tournament, who's going to win? So pound for pound, I feel like, is almost like sort of a resurrection of that question of like, there is something inside of us that really wants to know, like, weight classes aside, who is the best? And if this guy could somehow fight this guy in another weight class, who would win if somehow they were the same weight? Even though a lot of things break down. There are a lot of things that break down in pound for pound lists. And it gets really, really subjective comparing resumes and this champion to that champion and this person from this era, from this other fighter, from this different era, a lot of things break down. So I think people get riled up from pound for pound lists because sometimes, you'll have like a Volkanovski that is ranked ahead of an Islam Makhachev, even though Makhachev beat him, but because it was Volk that moved up in weight and had a competitive fight, he's ranked higher. So there's some things that are kind of wonky. People get really upset from them, but I don't think it's worth getting too upset. Just kind of, I know I'm telling MMA fans, don't get upset. I know that's kind of pointless, but like, I try not to hold on to them too tightly, but just sort of as a general guide of like who's on top, who's coming up. So my point for WMMA pound for pound list was so sparse. They had Bawanga and Bo there who are not that good. Yeah, everyone's opinion. Hello, Mr. Presnell. I must ask, why are there so much toxicity whenever Mr. Adesanya fights? Every forum I love to visit, they're either angry at him or expressing himself or angry at his opponents. I think a lot of that is because people have a lot of passion for Adesanya. Wherever there is passion for a fighter, there's going to be a contingent of fans that are equally passionate against that fighter. So like for Adesanya, my neighbor that lives a couple floors down, we see each other outside when we're getting the mail. And for him, like he likes MMA, he likes UFC, but he's like, hey man, let me know when Adesanya fights. That's my guy. Like for some reason, I think Adesanya has some things about him that are really winsome and attractive. He has a pretty cool style, a lot of personality. And so because of that, people really like him. But whenever I think someone is really liked, a lot of other people just feel like they have to hate that fighter. So yeah, I think that he's polarizing in that way. It is weird to me because I don't see him as like, he's not like a Colby Covington where he's just saying like outrageous things necessarily. I don't think so. I don't know how it could rub people. What's the rub? Why does he rub people the wrong way? Or is it just people disliking him because he is so well liked by other fans? Could be. Oh, looky here. We can throw these on the screen. While not a shutout, AFC definitely got the better of the matchups against Heat for sure. Yeah, that's the thing with co-promoted shows. Is it's like it's not necessarily like that one promotion doesn't have good fighters. It may just be the fighters that are available at any, when these two promotions cross paths, who has the better set of fighters at that time and which ones are available. Doesn't always mean that they don't have good fighters if they lose, but is First Round Management a Korean organization, as you mentioned, that lots of Koreans are signing with them? So First Round is one of the top MMA promotions in the world. They have had guys on their roster like John Jones, Jorge Masvidal. They've got like dozens and dozens of UFC fighters. They've got a huge staff. Malky and Abe Kawa, if you've heard of those names, they kind of run the organization. But yeah, really, really big, management organization. They have a wing, First Round Management Asia, which is run by my friend John Song. And they recently brought on my friend Steven, who is Korean, to sign a lot of Korean fighters. So they, in the UFC, they have like Jung Da-eun, they have the Iron Turtle. But yeah, and they're signing a lot more. So they're really trying to focus on Asia right now. What do you think of Dan Tom's nickname for Dricus as Third Reichus Duplessis? Pretty funny. I don't know why. I guess I don't get why he would be associated with like Nazi Germany. I'll have to hear more about that. Well, MMA scene in Japan is much larger than South Korea. The Koreans are finally starting to overtake the Japanese in skill. Yeah, it's kind of a fun rivalry because, like, you're right. Like Japan, they've got one of the oldest, if not the oldest, MMA like culture. so much history, and Korea doesn't necessarily have that like illustrious history that Japan does, but I think they've got some pretty good gyms. And Japan has some really good gyms too. You know, Pareister is good, Tribe Tokyo is good. Nothing against like Japanese gyms, but like there may be some different skills emphasized in some Korean gyms that maybe it's worth some of these Japanese gyms trying to be like, okay, how can we keep up with these guys? So, and they totally will. But it is a fun rivalry. Jack Slack, human backpack attack. Silly question. Then a serious question. When is Power Slap gonna fail? Oh gosh. I think it's gonna be around for a little bit. I think it is. I mean, if you've got a TV deal that runs a couple years, yeah, I think it's going to be around for a little bit. They want to at least have time to adjust things where they aren't working, experiment around with different things. I don't think it's going to get killed anytime soon. Do you love UFC NFT? I'm loving it. You know, I have not gotten into NFTs yet. Maybe at some point I will, but that's cool. Glad you're enjoying it. Are you surprised no one is talking about the last half of the James Krause betting funniness? Nuerdanbieke, who's fighting this week. You know, I always have to be careful when I talk about this because I don't want to like speculate and too much, but it doesn't seem like there was anything wrong done on Shayilan's side. He showed up to fight. His opponent was obviously injured, and he fought to the finish. I don't know if there's been any kind of investigation of what he knew, if he knew anything. Of course, if he did know anything, how would that change the result of the fight? He obviously didn't go easy on Derek Minner, so yeah, and yeah, that's all I'll say about that. The things I worried these Chinese fighting too close to Road to UFC, wondered if that could play an effect if they are indeed the Road to UFC. Yeah, so the fighters that we have, the Chinese fighters on Road to UFC. See, we had Ali Muratbek, who I didn't put on my list, but I'm pretty sure he is in Road to UFC. And the reason I'm not totally sure on him is just because he just fought. I'm not sure if he has an injury, but yeah, he fought like 2 weeks ago, and had like a fairly easy fight. But yeah, you have to realize like these Chinese fighters, they'll fight like 2 or 3 times in 1 month sometimes. Like putting in a lot of the records on Tapology, like they are used to fighting in a lot of tournaments where there's like 5 days set aside in a row, and they'll fight 3 times in those 5 days, and then they'll fight again the next month. You know, a lot of times they're not getting paid very much, so they're just kind of like, I have to just keep fighting over and over and over and over again. So they may fight 12 times in 1 year. You know, you look at Shayilan's record. Shayilan is like what, 39-10, and he's not even 30 yet. He's got almost 50 fights, and that's because he's fought like that. You know, he's fought in these tournaments where he fought over and over and over in the span of a couple of days. So even like 2 months, granted, like there's a lot to prepare for when you're fighting a higher caliber opponent, but I don't think that it's too much to ask for them to have 2 months to prepare for a fight. Because a lot of them have been doing that a lot. Are they even USADA testing in China? I don't believe Zhang or any of these Chinese fighters are clean. Well, there's no way for like me to know that. I think you can see where who got tested. I think that is public information, and a lot of these Chinese fighters actually even aren't in China right now. I know some of them have some have been there for the PI. Like I know, like Rong Ju is in China. He's not with the UFC though. Arichi Lung is in China. So some of them are there. A lot of them are training in the US. You know, Song Yadong, Zhang Weili is in Thailand right now. So yeah, I mean, apparently they're flying representatives from USADA out everywhere. Yeah. Don't you think in hindsight that Whaley getting the instant rematch with Rose was a good thing because she improved exponentially and got the belt back in the same place where she lost to Rose? Uh, I it Yeah, if anything, it definitely showed her evolution. Totally showed her evolution from the first Rose fight to the second, showed that she could be competitive against Rose. If they didn't fight, I feel like there would still be a lot of build up to a rematch between Rose and Jong. I mean, if you think about it this way, it almost favors Rose a little bit because Rose got to see a lot more of what Jong can do. They got to go 5 rounds together. So, whereas in the first fight, it was a first round KO finish for Rose. So, Rose got to see a lot more tape on Jong, got to see how she fares against her and maybe even get a little bit more confidence, although it was a close fight. We should always wish those with injuries good health. I wish Mr. Lee all the best wishes in the world, and a good recovery. Yeah, me too. I mean, fortunately, he's taking care of it. It's worse when you choose to fight through it, um, and hopefully, he's getting some top medical care. Steve Garcia was flatlined by Mahashate, which was funny. Do you think that was funny? Mahashate is interesting though, right? Yeah, I don't know if it was necessary. I didn't necessarily think it was like a funny KO, but that was like it was like one of my top like KO highlights of the year for sure. That was a great fight. I don't know why. Maybe just that's why I wondered. I thought that the Steve Garcia fight was kind of a weird matchup for Shayilan because I know Shayilan and Mahashate are pretty close. They're both Kazakh ethnicity. So yeah, Mahashate is interesting. You don't often see young Chinese fighters with that few of fights be successful at a high level. A high level, I'm talking about like, contender series, even getting a UFC win under their belt. Usually, Chinese fighters will enter that higher level once they're much farther along in their career. So I think Mahashate definitely has a lot of potential, a lot of upside. He had a great fight against Rafa Garcia, and I mean that just in like an entertainment sense. It was a crazy fight. Rafa Garcia is really good, so that kind of showed where Mahashate is at right now. But yeah, he's got a long career. Hopefully, he can keep training at the right place. He's been training down in South Florida, so yeah, high on that guy. Does it make you angry that Whaley got a title shot and subsequently the title over Marina? Can you imagine the silly fight of Carla and Marina on a paid portion of a pay-per-view? Doesn't make me angry. I don't really get that angry. Like, if I were to be angry about something, so today's news of Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena, the trilogy. If you didn't hear, that's going to be the main event of UFC in Vancouver on June 10th. I was like annoyed. I wouldn't say I was like angry about that, but if there's a fight I would be angry about it would be that because I really thought that Irene Aldana should have gotten the title shot over Pena. And I was thinking about going to that event because I don't live too far away from Vancouver, British Columbia. So I was thinking about going to that as well. But yeah, that is another good point. Like sometimes it's styles for title fights that the UFC is choosing, and Marina and Carla could be a good fight. Of course, like people were excited about Rose and Carla rematching, and we saw how that turned out. So sometimes you just can't tell how a fight is going to turn out. In the back of my argument, when Rose lost to Andrade, people were calling for the rematch versus Andrade. The media backed it, but when Whaley got the immediate rematch, everyone complained. Yeah, some wonky stuff. Are you a Patreon to Jack Slack? I became one a few months ago. Inspired me to make my timestamp channel as well as organize. Yeah, sorry, man. I still need to hit you up. I'm not a patron of Jack Slack, although that is not a bad idea. Another deep dive question for you. Do you remember the pre-fight talk from MMA Fighting about Whaley versus Joanna 2? I don't. These boys kept saying it was the perfect opportunity for Joanna to capitalize on Whaley's losing streak and lack of confidence. Interesting. I don't remember that. And then you followed it up with, you think Whaley is often looked at by sites like MMA Fighting as a mere stepping stone for their fighters that they interview a lot. Yeah, I can't really say anything about that. I'm not like close to a lot of, to really, like, really only one. I wouldn't even say I'm close to him. I'm not that close to anybody in MMA Fighting. So I don't know if that's what's going on there. Uh, I would be careful reading too much into a narrative about that. You know, everyone in the media, we're all supposed to have opinions, right? I know I can come off as as a little bit like playing it safe sometimes, but you know, you get more traffic and more clicks when you have strong opinions about things, especially if they're hot takes. So, you know, maybe that's why they put that out there. I'm curious to hear what author uh, published that. What do you think of Laura Sanko as a commentator? I've seen some polarizing views, but I thought she was really good since her points are really well spoken. Yeah, I think like legitimately, and I'm not just saying this, but I like Laura is one of my favorite commentators. She really is. Her and Paul Felder and John Anik, like that's like my dream team right there. Is the three of them, and I think really highly of Sanko. I think where she first stood out to me was her interviewing. You know, she would do the post fight interviews for Contender Series, and the questions that she asked were not just so different from like the typical like, what are you thinking right now? Although that's always a valid question, but like just the typical post fight questions. She asked questions that were like technical, but uh, not too kind of like, how did you feel when you landed that like low kick, or when you were you kept stinging them with that same punch? Did you see that paying off as the fight went on? You know, she she is really really smart, and she trains. I mean, she is like embedded so deeply in the MMA world, other fighters training. She trains herself. She's fought in Invicta, so like she really knows her stuff, and she is really well spoken. I think that she's great. Took way too long for her to get on the UFC broadcast. Um, yeah, and then mentioned here, yeah, Gary Monga just recovering from ACL surgery. Don't know much about MMA, but do you think she is knowledgeable, Lorisenko? Yeah, I really think she is. Her takes seem to be pretty good, or at least so far. Yeah, I like her. What did you think of Carla being booed at MSG? It made me embarrassed to be an MMA fan that people would turn on an American like Mark Raymundi said. Sickening. I mean, it's bigger than just nationality. Like people will boo a fighter if they don't like their personality or their fighting style. And Carla is not she's not like a she's not necessarily, at least to the public. I'm maybe like interpersonally, I'm not saying, don't hear me say she's a bad person, but she's not like an overly winsome personality. You know, she's not like an Amanda Hebos that's just like bubbling with positivity and, you know, seems like a really kind person. She is, she just is not, doesn't have as much character. And that's totally fine. Like, I feel like I kind of fall into that category sometimes too. I'm not like an overly, extroverted personality, but, um, you know, she hasn't like what's like a highlight reel finish that Carla has had that just like put her on the map. She hasn't had necessarily those either. She has good wins. Like she has the TKO finish over Yan Xiaonan. She obviously submitted Rose in their first fight, but yeah, she just hasn't like done a lot to win over the fans. And so I think that could be part of it. And like if you're fighting, like you have to realize Rose is extremely popular, and Rose has fought in Madison Square Garden several times. And so like, yeah, you better believe like if Carla fights Rose in Madison Square Garden, it's going to be a pro Rose crowd. least I think they fought in Madison Square Garden last time. But yeah, very rarely, unless you're in China fighting Zhang Wei Li, like most likely the crowd is going to be on Rose's side. She's a really popular fighter. So I think that could have been part of it too, of just like booing the fighter that's fighting the fighter that you like. I don't know if it really had anything to do with the fact that she was American. Hey, Kendris, longtime follower of your Instagram page. Do you think there's a sense of entitlement of opinion or elitism for those to have an opinion on MMA? I mean, everyone can have an opinion. I think how rigidly do you hold to your opinion, and are you willing to have discussion and dialogue with others? Um, a sense of entitlement of opinion or elitism? No, I think, we can all have our own opinion. And with social media, with Twitter, we all have our opinions. But yeah, I'm not sure if I understand the question, but definitely interesting to think about. Yes, plan for Road to UFC is still in Shanghai. Always could change at the last minute, but that is the plan. Why are people taking pound for pound rankings so seriously? Yeah, kind of covered that already. But yeah, okay. Interesting question here. Do you follow ACA at all? If so, how do you rate it in terms of talent? It seems like they have pretty good talent, and talent that has come out of that has generally fared well at a high level. This is a rabbit hole a little bit, but I tend to not really like, I'll look at the results for ACA, but the fact that ACA is like funded by and run by a like dictator warlord is a little bit problematic for me, and I don't want to just like look the other way on that. Um, so I think that's why I don't really follow ACA. At least like I don't watch it, I don't tweet about it. I'm not going to cover it. If I'm managing fighters, I'm probably not going to be sending anyone there. Just because like you vote with your money, you buy the pay-per-view, that goes to that part of that goes to Ramzan Kadyrov's pocket. And you know, I I think that a lot of his leadership has been pretty problematic, and he is like the DNA behind that promotion. Like you can't separate ACA from Ramzan Kadyrov. So, and then they had the fight with his son a couple months ago, a 15-year-old kid fighting a pro fight, and that was just kind of a circus and really wonky. And that definitely like I was like, okay, I may not like where the funding comes from and the culture around this promotion, but at least these are like normal MMA fights. And then that kind of took away some of my like even trust in their legitimacy. Not saying all the fights are fixed or that they're illegitimate, but I was just like, man, like this is kind of just a political prop show for Kadyrov. Like no one's going to go in there and lose to one of Kadyrov's guys. So maybe an unpopular opinion, but that's just how I feel. Come back to pound for pound talking a point isn't a measure of skill, not accomplishment, as Jack Slack has said. Yeah, I mean that's the problem with pound for pound, right? There is no MMA dictionary that defines pound for pound, and so everyone has a slightly different view of it. So I think that's the issue with it. What is the best way to watch Chinese MMA shows? Oof, yeah. The way that I do it. So let me tell you guys, this is not always going to help you watch them live, but let me tell you about a website that I use that has helped me fill in a lot of gaps for fighters' records on Tapology. See if I can put this down there because this will be a lot easier. Guy that runs this website, uh, right? .net. He like this guy like puts every single Chinese event. Yeah, on this website. And so many like re-airs of events, I'll go there to look for them. Yeah, it's not like a secret website or anything, but that's a really, really helpful place to watch Chinese fights, and probably like the most comprehensive library. There's others, but yeah, that's a really good website to watch Chinese fights. Honestly, like if the best way, like the place to start is set up a WeChat account. So get the app, download WeChat, and then follow different promotions on WeChat. You can, if you don't know Chinese, you can try searching for them in English. Otherwise, you may have to try and track down the Chinese name for promotions. But yeah, what I do is I follow all the major Chinese promotions, a lot of gyms as well, because and then they'll post articles, right? So WLF will post an article basically telling you about their event and how to watch it, who's on the card. So that's one, probably like the best way I could tell you to follow Chinese MMA and like actually watch it. They will air on different apps sometimes. Every once in a while, they will be exclusive to China. I know JCK, like for example, right now has a deal with Migu, where they are airing on Migu, and that's a China only thing. So if you can get your hands on a VPN and switch your country to China, good luck. I hate having to do that. I myself haven't necessarily figured out a good system with that, but yeah, follow promotions on WeChat, and then a lot of times when I talk about them or like post about them, I'll tell you how you can watch it. Um, you can get the Douyin app in the US. At least you can now. You might have like $1 million bounty on your head here in a couple weeks in the US, if like TikTok gets banned. But for now, you can download the Douyin app. You have to switch your app store to China, download it, and then you can switch your app store back. So I have that on my phone right now, and I don't even use I don't use a VPN. And I was able to watch the last WLF show that way. So look up articles. But yeah, it's tricky. That's why I was like so happy when JCK was on Fight Pass, because obviously for me in the US, like yeah, um, super easy. Let's see. Some of these comments are not always very nice, so I may skip them. Not the 2022 Road to UFC winner, but Jekka Sargi got signed, and recently Mola, his sponsor and Graham Boylan, his manager, confirmed his debut will be on June 17th. Didn't share who he will fight. Well, there you go. That June 17th card. Wonder if that's going to be in California. I don't have any knowledge of why I would say that, but let's just look at this June 17th card. Josh Emmett versus Ilya Topuria is the main event. Of course, Josh Emmett trains in California, Sacramento. If Jekka is training in San Diego, so I don't know. Maybe June 17th, UFC will have a fight night in California, and Jekka will be on there. Will the UFC ever come back to Macau? I doubt it, honestly. I don't. If they could, it's like, why would they go to Macau over Shanghai, Beijing, or Singapore? If they're going to have like a Pan-Asian card, they will probably go to Singapore. If they're going to have like a China focus card, they're probably going to go to Shanghai or Beijing. The thing with you know, yeah, it's a big gambling economy. You can compare it to Las Vegas. That's great, but like it's all about the venue, right? So the Cotai Arena could seat a couple thousand people, but I think they want to have bigger shows now that they've got some like bigger Asian MMA fighters, stars. I think they'll probably want to have bigger shows than that. So I would be doubtful unless unless there's some other venue I don't know about where they can have more fighters or a bigger crowd. Do you think that James Krause is the funniest man in MMA? I don't know about that. I think if you're actually like talking about, funny people, I don't think so. He was objectively a good coach and fighter, but he keeps doing hilarious things. You should look up and it was interesting. Like James Krause is obviously like brilliant, really, really smart, but like he made a couple obviously like really big blunders last year that got him in a lot of trouble. So really surprising that he is like, such a smart guy, but kind of messed up. Don't ever see UFC going back to Macau. Now, no point now that they have access to the mainland. Let's see. Okay, Kendra, yeah, going back to your question. Sorry, I wrote that question wrong. Elitism, as in people who train, feel like they have better opinions than those who don't. Yeah, I can see their argument. So I think if I'm putting words in your mouth, it sounds like what you're saying is a lot of times fighters will get mad at the media and say like, well, you don't train. Why don't you come in here and have an MMA fight? Or fighters have even been like, I think every single media member should have to like have 2 fights or like train for this long before they can, which is obviously ridiculous. In no other sport is that ever expected. In other sports, yeah, a lot of your talking heads will be former athletes, but the majority of people who are like writing articles and doing interviews have never been a professional athlete, and that's not expected. And a lot of times the people who are the smartest aren't necessarily the best at presenting information or being on camera or writing, and that's fine. Like nobody can be everything, but I definitely think that media is underappreciated by a lot of fighters in the sense of like, or I think like there's a big question of like, what is the media even here for? Like for fighters, it's kind of sometimes some fighters I feel like they think like the media is there to get them PR. The UFC seems to think that the media is there to get them PR. Sometimes some media is there just for clickbait and getting clicks. So the question is, what is the media even here for? Are we here to objectively cover things and hold power to accountability and just like try to report on fact as much as we can? The reality is like no one agrees on what the media is there for. So could the media do a better job understanding what fighters have to go through? Absolutely. And that's why we do interviews. That's why media members will show up to a gym and interview fighters on the mats. So it's not that everyone's doing a bad job of that, but there's a lot of misunderstandings for sure. When is the UFC going to stop being lazy and hiding all their talent? Merger UFC and WWE will make them more lazy, correct? I mean, isn't this kind of the problem with having like 700 fighters on your roster, like, and having like 3 events every month and TV shows and contender series and this and that? Like, how do you expect anyone to adequately promote everyone what they're worth? You can't. Like, your options are scale down your roster, but then like if you're trying to have the best talent in the world and you're also trying to reach all these markets in the world, you need fighters from all these different countries and you need them to be active. And if you want to like, pre-pandemic where you're hosting shows in different cities and countries every week, like You have to have fighters for that. So if you have this strategy of global growth, like you have to have a big roster. So I don't know what the best case situation would be, to be honest. Like, you know, they have 700 fighters on their roster, and UFC really only has one Instagram channel, one Twitter account, one YouTube channel. Like, you can only do so much. I mean, people got mad at the UFC for like over promoting Power Slap over UFC 284. And it was like, I mean, the UFC makes a choice about what they're going to promote. They can only do so much. Like, I wish that they would promote Road to UFC a lot more, but that would mean that less things would get, or other things would get less attention. So, yeah, it's like I agree with you, but I also don't know what the solution would be. John Wayne Lee should be what she should be as an inspiration. She with her team goes around the world training and learning from the best people at various disciplines, meeting new people, showing people what hard work really is. Of course, yeah, I appreciate that. I think that she's had a good. I think that her plan for training has been great. It seemed like a combination of sticking with people that know her really well, with being able to travel around and get different looks, train at different places. I think that's a great idea. Are you a fan of MMA fighters like Adesanya and Volk making their own channels as their form of media? Like Adesanya said, he can do interviews and media's job on his own channel. Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm definitely a fan of fighters having their own YouTube channel. I love that, and I think if they can hire people to help them out with that, I think that's a great idea, because I think it's great when fighters get to make the content that they are really passionate about. I don't know if, like, Adesanya saying like he can do the media's job, you know, him saying like, "Oh, I can hire a friend of mine to interview me and put it on my channel. Why do I need to go to a studio, or why do I need to hop on a Zoom call with a stranger?" Yeah, from his perspective, I can definitely see the argument for that. He he has his own channel, but you have to realize too, like I remember when Patty Pimblett was on the MMA Hour for the first time, and for Patty, like he was really, really well known in England, but not so much outside of England. So for him, that was like a really big deal. And it's like, okay, Patty Pimblett, you can have your own YouTube channel at that point in your career, but like getting interviewed by other people, that's what I think helps grow your audience. There's a, in social media, we talk about like growing your audience versus nurturing your audience. Right now, like a lot of what I'm doing right here, this is a really weird way to say it, but like this is sort of like audience. What I'm doing now is sort of like audience nurturing. I do want to like grow this channel, but like all of us interacting together, that's like us just like um, building a community. And then, but then like if I am making a YouTube video where I'm commenting on some really like, hot topic, like this week I made a video about some thoughts, some of them probably a little half baked, but like thoughts about the UFC WWE merger. It's a popular topic. I'm hoping to grow my YouTube channel that way. So that's like getting outside of my current boundary. Whereas like this is just kind of a fun time for us to have together, that builds channel loyalty, all that stuff. So if you're a fighter starting your own YouTube channel, you're going to be like nurturing your own audience, and there's a place for that. And then if you're being interviewed by other media sites, that's growing your influence and growing your fan base. And like, yeah, you may have a friend that you really like, you get along with well, and maybe that brings out some natural chemistry and conversation that you couldn't have with like a stranger in the media. But you also have to realize like, and by the way, I'm not comparing myself to Ariel Helwani, but like Ariel Helwani has a degree in journalism and he is really good at asking questions. and he has a team behind him that are professionals. And I think that if I have a friend that can interview me on my own YouTube channel and they can always bring out the best in me, I think you may want to rethink that, because I think that there's a lot of professionals out there that can ask you surprising questions or things that you're a little bit surprised at, that can do things that someone that you know on your channel may not be able to do. So I don't. I think it's a little bit narrow minded for a fighter to just like hone in and say I can do this all myself, when there's a lot of talented people out there that have a lot of things that could add to your fan base. But I definitely understand why fighters are nervous to do that, because it's more risky. What if they're going to ask questions I don't like? This could be a bad experience. So uh yeah, kind of some stuff. In general, guys, like, don't there's some questions about like racism, and I'm not like I'm never ever going to talk about that, but like I know when I talk, if I talk about that a lot, then it's going to go down a rabbit hole and emotions are going to get flared up. I would just like rather like the thing about like making jokes that are racist is like you just don't know how other people are going to perceive your comments. And I know like people think that like other people are too sensitive or whatnot, but like just understand that for some people, especially if you're making jokes about someone's identity of being a certain ethnicity, nationality, like that's very personal for them. And I never want to like feed into that. So I would just say like you may feel like you're trying to be harmless to not offend anyone, that it's all just fun, but other people don't see it that way. So just consider that. Thoughts on Kareem Zidane? Do you like his work? I do. I think that we need a lot more people like Kareem in MMA media, and it sucks that like even him reporting on bloody like that bloody elbow and featuring work like his, like bloody elbow had to like temporarily shut down or just like transition. Like it sucks that that kind of work isn't in high demand. And could there be like minor criticisms of Kareem Zidane? Sure, but like overall, like the fact that he is willing to like call out people that are allied with Ramzan Kadyrov and Ramzan Kadyrov himself, like that could be a really dangerous work. Like that could literally be a dangerous work, right? We know like when media members consistently criticize powerful people who are really insecure, like Kadyrov, then they sometimes resort to violence. And so, like, yeah, props for just like having the guts to report on that. So yeah, I do respect his work. I appreciate that he is willing to talk about things that other people aren't. I appreciate that he's willing to do his own work. Um, you may disagree if he's always being fair, but I I do appreciate that he is willing to like be one of the few voices that will call people out for associating with someone who like literally kills people just because they're gay. Like kills them, tortures them. And in the meantime, there's like UFC fighters that are like, yeah, but I'm still gonna hang out with him or I'm gonna fight for his promotion. Like so yeah, I appreciate Kareem. Thing is, I'd rather have no card than a Rosenstrike main card. Why in the world did they switch the Johnny Walker Anthony Smith fight to like the co-main? I don't have an answer for you guys. Like, yeah, that seemed like a perfect main event for a live crowd, and then they like a Rosenstrike Almeida co-main event would have been perfect. think that would have been really good. It's not that Almeida isn't good. It's not that Rosenstrike isn't good, but it's just like there's just not the like charisma, and at least not yet from those two. There's just not the charisma and personality and the popularity that Anthony Smith and Johnny Walker have. It's just that was just like such a more fun main event. And I don't know why on earth they would switch it. Nolan King with MMA Junkie said that they were trying to find another fight to serve as the main event for that UFC Nashville card. And then when they couldn't find another fight for the main event, that's when they switched it over to Almeida Rosenstrike. Man, it just seemed like you had the perfect main event in Johnny Walker, Anthony Smith. Both guys have served in the main event before. They're used to that rub. So maybe they're trying to build Almeida into more of a star. He's obviously super talented. So maybe that's what they're trying to do, but it just seems like, yeah, maybe that would have been better for like an Apex card, that main event. Do you know the story of, can't even read it right, Hu Yaozong, or Yaozong, who's signed to the UFC? Where do you think he goes from here after his release? Oh, good question. So if you look at where the UFC was on Chinese talent, that was November of 2017. They held, I think, that they held that Shanghai card, and I think that was the event that Hu debuted on. Let's double check that. Yeah, November of 2017 is when Hu Yaozong debuted. Eesh, before that fight, he was 3-0, but his opponents had a combined record of 1-5. You know, I think in that stage of the UFC trying to sign Chinese talent, you have to realize like there was not a UFC PI in Shanghai, right? That opened in 2019. On that card, they signed a lot of talent. I feel like I don't know the like a literal story behind that, but there was a lot of fighters from China that they signed for that card, and it seemed like in some sense they were a little bit like, hey, we don't know who's going to look good, be successful or not. We're just going to kind of scoop up who we can right now, throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. In Hu Yaozong, he was a Chinese heavyweight. And you have to know, like, the dream for the UFC is to have a Yao Ming. The dream is to have a like light heavyweight or heavyweight Chinese fighter that knocks people out. That is what they really want. Like, I mean, you just look at the way they book heavyweights on cards, how often heavyweights get put in main events. Like, they know heavyweights are a bigger draw. And if we can get who is a big draw in weight classes with who is a big draw in the world's most populated country, then we can get like that's like our ultimate star. So for them to sign Hu Yaozong, I mean, I'll be honest, he did not deserve to be signed to the UFC at that point. He was 3-0, had not fought in any good competition, but he got signed. He fought at a heavyweight at that time. I think for that, they were just kind of like, okay, who is like the best heavyweight in China that we can sign today? I think that's probably what they did there. Then they got him down to 260 or 205, then down to 185. They had him eventually at the PI. So, you know, for him, he was supposed to fight. Let's see, kind of his stats. So he's just 28 years old. He's 3-3. He has fought 3 times in the UFC. So he has that going for him. He was supposed to fight at WKG last November. So he was supposed to, he had a fight booked post UFC for last November. That event got canceled because of COVID stuff. So I would expect you'll probably see him booked, unless there's an injury I don't know about. But I've seen pictures of him like training at the PI, training at some gyms in China. So he's still like training a lot. So I would expect you'll probably see him booked on a regional Chinese show here fairly soon. But yeah, he's still 28. Imagine if if he can find his weight class. Don't know if he's going to stay either at middleweight or light heavyweight. He can find his weight class. He can get a couple knockouts. I think he'll be back in the UFC because they have a relationship with him. They know him. He's in the PI system. They like that. So and kind of what I was saying, you may have kind of put the pieces together yourself, but they may think that they have that big that star, that Yao Ming kind of star in Zhang Mingyang. So really stinks that his fight fell through this last February, but hopefully they can get him on a show this summer. Yeah, I think that he has a lot of potential. So keep an eye on him. Less cards, more quality would be my solution. Thoughts on that, Honorable Chris? I mean, yeah, that's what a lot of people want. The UFC seems to believe that they are set on growing worldwide. Before the pandemic, it was like they're in a different country once a month in like two US cities every month, on average, something like that. And they want to grow. They want to take over the world. So for them to do that, they have to have a huge roster. They have to have a lot of shows. For them to be able to have shows in Croatia, in the Czech Republic, in South Korea, all this stuff, you have to have a roster to support that. So that's what they want. Less cards would mean less traveling. I'm not necessarily saying what I would want, but that's what they want. So, and add to that, like Izzy having people interview him on his own channel and labeled that as media. Well, it is technically media, if it's on YouTube, it is technically media. It is a video, but respectable media, MMA media, yeah, it's kind of like the whole Mac Life thing. Yeah, having less cards isn't an option for UFC anymore to have contractual obligations. That is another good point. They have all these, like they have a deal with the T-Mobile Arena for a certain number of shows every year. They have an agreement with Abu Dhabi and Singapore. They have to go to these places. So and they have those deals because they make a lot of money from those deals. So yeah, it's how do you backpedal from that? I don't know if you can. Oh, women's one punch KO just now over on PFL. Thank you for letting me know. Let me check that result. Obviously, I'm not following PFL right now because I'm talking to you all. Okay, so unfortunately for Japanese MMA fans, Yoko Higashi lost by second round TKO ground and pound against Marina at PFL. Amber Leibrock head kick to hammer fists over Martina Jindrova. Shame. I've liked watching Martina, but good for Amber. Very cool. Let's see. Yeah, Jaden, I hear you, man. I no disrespect for you, but I'm probably not going to put those on the screen. That's doing okay. My man Russell Jamie, have you discussed the Maxim and Alma Bay of signings yet? Thank you for bringing that up. That is some news this week. I want to incorporate. I'm trying not for this show to be like literally 7 hours long. So some things I just kind of like haven't covered yet. But yeah, Asian MMA news from this week. You've got Azat Maxim and Asu Almabayev, two incredibly talented Kazakh flyweights, got signed to the UFC this week. Maxim he's like 16-0. Almabayev has a ridiculous record too. Both those guys been tearing through the Kazakh MMA scene, Brave, all that stuff. Like really big signings. What it made me think of, you know what it made me think? The UFC was supposed to visit Almaty, Kazakhstan, June of 2020. We know what happened and why they didn't go June of 2020. But if you're beefing up your Kazakh roster, makes me wonder if you're building towards something. I don't have any inside knowledge on this just yet. I may start asking around, but I feel like now is like the perfect time to go to Kazakhstan. Obviously, anytime going forward, you could go there, sell out a show, it would be amazing. But think about it, like if you're going to go to Kazakhstan, at least right now, most likely it's going to be a fight night card. Most likely not going to have a pay-per-view. Typically, unless it's like, an aforementioned like Singapore or Abu Dhabi card, you're not going to have like a pay-per-view in like a time slot that's going to be awkward for the US audience. So if they go to Kazakhstan, it most likely be a fight night card. And with that, probably wouldn't be a title fight. So, I mean, who's the most obvious fighter to put in the main event of a Kazakhstan show right now? No brainer. Shavkat Rakhmonov. Put him against like for a number one contender fight at welterweight. Like now is just the perfect time to do that. Not saying you couldn't have like in the future Shavkat fighting for a title in Kazakhstan. That would be huge, but like I feel like what's next for him is a top 5 fight. You could potentially even a number one contender fight. That's just like perfect for a fight night main event. Perfect time to have a show in Kazakhstan. I know Dana has said like we don't like to deal with any BS regarding COVID-19 stuff. Like we don't want any of that. So that's why they haven't gone to some places just yet. So I don't know what that's like in Kazakhstan right now, but there's been so many shows going on in Kazakhstan. Ailash Pride, Octagon, all those guys have been having shows in Kazakhstan. So I don't know. Hopefully soon. How long till that type of main event starts to alienate fans? Yeah, assuming you're talking about the Rosenstrike and Almeida. UFC doesn't care because they get guaranteed money, right? Well, I mean, that's what's so confusing to me is like it seems like if you're trying to sell out an arena, you can't just put on like a Apex level like an ESPN guaranteed money kind of main event. Like you should have a main event that you think can sell out an arena. And the same thing with the Amanda Nunes and Juliana Pena trilogy. Does not like, I mean, just I have not seen any like positive reactions. Not one. I have one Canadian media member friend that was about to get plane tickets for Vancouver until I saw this main event, and I was thinking I still might, but like because I could drive to that Vancouver show. It's like 5 or 6 hours from me, but we'll see. And it'd be awesome if I could cover that as media and get a free ticket, but that's unlikely. Yeah, I don't know why. The Nunes and Pena thing might have been an availability thing, so I may give him a free pass with that. Who's available? Obviously, it's hard to like stack a card in June when you have typically UFC has 2 pay-per-views in July, and obviously the first one of those is a big one. Let's see. Okay, getting to the end here. Probably need to wrap things up. Been going for an hour and a half. Just a couple more. Not really sure I understand that question. One is putting on less events this year outside the Lupini events, and the quality has not gone up. It just means less fights for the fighters on the roster. Fighters need to stay busy. Yeah, that's another rabbit hole. The whole one Friday fight shows, and like I've been tracking. So I keep like a roster for myself of promotions like UFC and One, and like One Championship has definitely been downsizing their MMA roster. That's obvious. Like obvious why they have three other combat sports that they're trying to promote as well, and they don't have the budget to be able to put on like three monster cards every single month. So they have four smaller cards that are honestly pretty MMA light and really cheap as far as MMA goes. Uh, Most of the fighters that are on the MMA fighters that are on these Friday Fights cards are like fighting for the first or second time. Some exceptions, we had Keanu Suba fight this morning, but yeah. So that's definitely that's a cost saving measure for One Championship for sure. Um, so I don't know. I mean, a lot of their strategies right now are kind of confusing me, but um, I'll do this one and then one more. Could you see UFC doing events in a country that they've never done before, like Thailand and Indonesia, maybe, perhaps even more Middle Eastern countries other than UAE? Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, they at least in terms of like, could they make a good show and draw a sizable crowd for Thailand and Indonesia? Definitely. For things like UFC, like there's a couple extra factors that are in play that aren't always in play for regional shows. So like they if they're going to like have an event in Kazakhstan, Indonesia, Thailand, there's a lot of things that you may not think about in terms of venue. Can they hold an event in this venue and it support all of their like production needs? A lot of the hang up of why they didn't go to Brazil for so long. Like if you've been an MMA fan for a long time, like they went back to Brazil in 2011, but before that, the last time it was like the 90s. It had been like 12, 13 years where they didn't go to Brazil at all. And that was just because they didn't have a venue that worked out for them for all their like production and broadcast needs, for them to be able to broadcast all over the world, for them to have places for their team, all of their equipment, things like that. And that was why. It wasn't because there wasn't demand. Um, so that's really the question. Now, One Championship has had plenty of shows in like Impact Arena, so I don't know how comparable that is to what the UFC needs out of a location, but uh, yeah. So there's that. There's also like, do we have a TV deal that we're satisfied with in this country? Because like, if they're going to go to Thailand, they're going because they're trying to grow the sport in Thailand. They're like, yeah, we want to have this one night where we can put on a great show for fans, make some money, but we also want to have an ongoing relationship with that market. And having this event is going to get people interested. It's going to get other like fans in Thailand interested and connected to the UFC product. So, um, yeah, that's another big deal. And then of course, like having fighters that they can kind of hang the event around. Like if they were to go to Thailand tomorrow, they couldn't have someone for a main event there. The really like yeah, the only fighter that they have is Loma Lukbunmi. Now there's a lot of fighters that train in Thailand that they could put on that card that are from other countries. Sure, that would be great, but like they don't even like a co-main event slot. I don't know if you're going to put Loma Lukbunmi in a co-main event slot. Yeah, you maybe could, but not tomorrow. So that's the other thing. And even if you're going to go out and sign a bunch of fighters like the UFC did when they went to Shanghai, I don't know if there's a lot of Thai talent. You've got Top Noi, they've already got Loma. They're bringing in Peter Daniso into Road to UFC. Even him, he's a little on like, I mean, it's kind of like we'll see what you're made of. It's not like he has been around. He's really young. He's only 22. So that's another big thing, is just like, can we put fighters that people are going to be interested watching locally on the show? So Middle East is definitely getting there. WWE has had events in Saudi Arabia, so maybe we could see that in the future. Um, where else could they go in Saudi Arabia or in a Middle East? Got like Riyadh, of course, Abu Dhabi. I mean, they haven't been to Dubai yet. Wonder if that's just like a. I wonder if that's just like, yeah, we have this really good deal with Abu Dhabi. Everything works out beautifully, but yeah, it's like almost kind of interesting that they haven't gone to Dubai yet or had anything in Dubai, since that's like a much more like bigger tourist destination. But um, yeah, and then Indonesia, that's another thing. Like the One Pride shows, as far as I know, those are in tennis arenas, tennis stadiums, whatever. Those are probably you could probably fit a couple thousand people in there, but in terms of like a like 15 to 20,000, even like a 12,000 person arena, do they have that, and does it meet all the UFC's needs? Those are the questions. That's like the first question the UFC asks, is like, is there a place for us? I think that the fan demand would be there for Indonesia. So all right. Let's see. Yeah, you said UFC plans to have a Chinese champion from the heavyweight classes, but they already have a champion. Well, it's not that they're not satisfied with Wei Li. They're over the moon about having Zhang Wei Li as a champion. That worked out, like, that couldn't have worked out better for them. She took the short road to the title. She headlined an event in China. She won the belt in China by knockout. Like, couldn't have worked out better. But like, yeah, like the I'm saying like a heavyweight. If you like, all things considered, on like a blank slate, a heavyweight is going to be a bigger draw than a women's strawweight. Usually, I'm not. That's not like, I know not all heavyweights are super exciting, but like there's with heavyweights, there's that sort of larger than life uh, mentality about it. And so and then there's the knockout thing as well. So I think you look at like UFC shows, so much of the time they have these heavyweight main events over fights that are probably more entertaining between ranked fighters, but it's like they their stats, their research probably seem to indicate that like fans respond more positively, at least like the casual fan base responds more positively to heavyweights, to men that are 6'7" and knock people out. Like that's what they want from China. That's what they want from like every fan base if they can get it. But it's not that they're not satisfied, but I just that would be, I think, an even bigger appeal. Um, Everyone wants a Yao Ming. Every like sports league wants Yao Ming, because like, when I went to China, and I hear it's still this way, like Yao Ming's face is everywhere. It's on the sides of buses, it's in grocery stores. And when I went there, he was retired by then, but he was still like a huge thing. He seemed like he was like a Michael Jordan. Yeah. I think you said it. Big weight classes always sell better than smaller weight classes, even places like Asian countries. Yeah. Last question from Cheyenne. Maybe that's just where you live. It'd be very convenient if your name was actually Cheyenne, Wyoming, but I'm guessing that's where you live. Last question for me. Where do they find Karami for WLF tomorrow? Massive difference in experience. Yeah, Chinese matchmaking can be really interesting. So a lot of times in these Chinese shows, what really excites them, and I think what excites their fan base, is like, let's get a bunch of Chinese fighters and let's just put them up against tons and tons of foreigners. And it'll be like this China versus the world thing, where we can see like how China fares against everybody else. So they'll do that, and then they'll find foreigners that may be like training in China to put these Chinese fighters up against. You see this all the time, and this WLF show tomorrow is totally like that. Sometimes those fighters that they're bringing in do have like a pretty extensive background in another martial art, which I think Karami, he has a pretty like strong kickboxing resume. And so I think that is where it is. I'm with you. That's not what I love to see. It's not what I want to see, especially. I mean, that doesn't really like benefit the Chinese fighters in terms of building their experience. But I think that is a matter of like them being like, yeah, this is really fun for us. This is a fun show for our fans, for the people watching live. They love seeing an American come in. They love seeing an Iranian guy come in and fight their Chinese fighters. Probably a little bit of nationalistic pride within that. But you know, but I can also see how that is interesting if you're a Chinese person seeing 12 Chinese fighters go up against people from all around the world. There is something appealing about that if you know nothing about MMA, you know. And the thing is that this show, you also have to look at where the show is. It is not in a Beijing, a Shanghai, a Guangzhou. It's in a pretty smaller, it's a smaller city in Guizhou province, a little bit off the beaten path. Not saying it's like a village necessarily, but it's not like they're not trying to draw the biggest crowd available, is what I'm saying. And so it wouldn't surprise me if there's not a lot of like diehard MMA fans at the show. It's more of just like, we love this city, we have a relationship, maybe we have a few fighters from the area, and we just want to put on a fun show for those in attendance. So that's my guess of what their idea is. And yeah, next comment, you said it. People from homogeneous countries love to watch their own go up against foreigners. So we'll see how it pans out. Kind of risky for the Chinese fighters, because if you lose to an 0-0 fighter, then you know you can't get that loss back. It's always on your record. So a little bit risky, but they probably think it's a safe win. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate it. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Be back next week, the 14th. We'll be talking about more things. Maybe we'll know all of the Road to UFC fights. Maybe we won't. But yeah, I'll see if I can come back at you with some news next week. But thank you so much. Really appreciate all of you guys. This is fun. We'll see you next week.